The story of Hiroo Onoda is one of the most haunting chapters in military history, a tale of a Japanese intelligence officer who refused to believe the world had moved on. Onoda served in the Imperial Japanese Army and became the most famous of the Zanryoku-nai, or the Japanese holdouts who continued to fight for decades after the Pacific theater of World War II had officially closed. These men were driven by a relentless, dogmatic, militaristic indoctrination, or in many cases, they were simply never informed that their nation had surrendered. Onoda's path to the jungle began at the Nakano School, an elite institution where he was rigorously trained as an intelligence officer. There, he mastered the dark arts of guerrilla warfare and the meticulous gathering of intelligence, skills that would allow him to vanish into the wilderness for nearly 30 years. In the closing months of 1944, Onoda was deployed to Lubang Island, situated near Luzon in the Philippines. Upon his arrival, he linked up with a contingent of Japanese soldiers who were already stationed on the island. It was here that Major Yoshimi Taniguchi issued the orders that would define the next 3 decades of Onoda's life. Taniguchi commanded him to survive by living off the land and strictly forbade him from taking his own life through suicide. The major offered a solemn reassurance, telling Onoda that whether it took 3 years or 5, the army would eventually return for him. He was told that as long as he had even one soldier under his command, he was required to continue leading them. However, friction with higher-ranking officers on the island prevented Onoda from executing his primary mission, the sabotage of the enemy's harbor pier and airstrip. This failure paved the way for an easy American conquest of the island in February 1945. As the U.S. forces took control, the Japanese troops fractured into small groups of 3 or 4, retreating deep into the dense jungle. Most were eventually captured or killed, until only Hiroo Onoda and 3 men under his authority remained active: Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private First Class Kinshichi Kazuka. This small cell established a secret base high in the mountains. Even after Japan's formal surrender in September 1945, Onoda's war continued. The group soon discovered a leaflet left by local islanders which stated that the war had ended on August 15th and urged them to descend from the mountains. Onoda and his men analyzed the paper and concluded it was nothing more than a deceptive Allied propaganda trick. Operating under this delusion, they continued to raid local Filipino communities for food and essential resources. General Tomoyuki Yamashita of the 14th Area Army eventually ordered surrender leaflets to be dropped from aircraft. But once again, the group dismissed them as a sophisticated ruse. Their isolation meant they had no knowledge of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, making the idea of a Japanese surrender seem impossible to them. The group's cohesion began to crumble in 1949, when Yuichi Akatsu escaped, eventually surrendering to Filipino forces in 1950. This desertion only made the remaining 3 more paranoid and hyper-vigilant against perceived disloyalty. In 1952, the search efforts intensified as aircraft dropped letters and photographs from the soldiers' own families. Yet the trio stubbornly wrote these off as another enemy trick. Every piece of evidence they encountered only served to deepen their hostility. Clad in their aging imperial uniforms, they viewed any civilian they encountered as an Allied soldier in disguise, part of a strategy to lure them into the open. Consequently, they did not hesitate to open fire on the local population. In 1953, Corporal Shimada was shot in the leg during an encounter, but he managed to recover with Onoda's assistance. However, on May 7, 1954, Shimada's luck ran out. He was killed by a search party after he fired upon his potential rescuers, who were forced to return fire on a beach at Guntin. With Shimada gone, only Onoda and Kazuka remained to carry out their phantom mission of sabotage and intelligence gathering against an enemy that no longer existed. This 2-man war persisted for nearly 20 more years, until October 19, 1972. During a skirmish with local police while the pair was attempting to burn a collection of rice belonging to a farmer, Kazuka was shot and killed. Lieutenant Onoda was finally alone in the wilderness. His isolation lasted until February 20, 1974, when a determined Japanese explorer named Norio Suzuki successfully tracked him down. Despite the encounter, Onoda still refused to surrender, insisting that he could only stand down if ordered by his superior. Suzuki returned to Japan and managed to locate Onoda's original commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, who was then working at a bookstore. In March 1974, Taniguchi traveled to the Philippines to fulfill his decades-old promise. In a surreal ceremony, Onoda, still wearing his tattered 30-year-old army uniform, saluted the Japanese flag and surrendered his samurai sword, his still-functioning Arisaka Type 99 rifle, 500 rounds of ammunition, several hand grenades, and his family dagger. The Philippine government, led by President Ferdinand Marcos, granted Onoda a full pardon. This decision took into account that while Onoda had killed 30 innocent people during his long campaign, he genuinely believed the war was still raging. Upon his return to Japan, Onoda became an instant celebrity, but he struggled immensely to adapt to a post-war society that had abandoned its traditional values. After publishing his autobiography, he moved to Brazil in 1975 to raise cattle, later establishing a series of nature schools for youth. In his final years, Onoda reflected on his ordeal, stating that while every soldier was prepared for death, his specific orders as an intelligence officer were to conduct guerrilla warfare and stay alive. He noted that as an officer, failing to carry out those orders would have brought him great shame, fueled by his intensely competitive nature. If this story of ultimate loyalty in the haunting shadows of the past has moved you, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are dedicated to unearthing the history that time tried to bury and exploring the mysteries of the human spirit. Join us as we continue to dig deeper into the archives of the unknown. The next great discovery is just around the corner,